Infrastructure. Steel and concrete metaphors for modernity and development. But so much more than just that. Infrastructure is the artery of growth. Our ports, highways, transport systems, refineries, bridges deliver essential services. Water and sanitation, health and education. Infrastructure provides access to energy. It creates jobs and economic growth. It is the pulse of a vibrant country with the power to change lives and connect communities. Equally, with the world facing a climate crisis, the responsibility on the industry to build India's growth story with infrastructure that is resilient and sustainable has never been greater. Sustainable infrastructure is a synergy between climate mitigation and economic growth. It presents a tremendous opportunity for positive change. Sustainable infrastructure is at the heart of achieving global climate targets, sustainable development goals, and a strong and resilient global economy. Welcome to Adani presents NDTV Infrashakti Awards with knowledge partners the Infra Vision Foundation, India's biggest infrastructure campaign aimed at promoting equitable and sustainable development for the people, the economy, and the planet.
Hello and welcome to the start of a conversation about sustainability in infrastructure. What are the strategies and the solutions that we need to deliver to ensure sustainable infrastructure that will help deliver a Viksit Bharat? What are the best practices in infrastructure from across the country that could be replicated elsewhere? What are the innovations needed for resilient infrastructure and the smart solutions to address these challenges? These are conversations that we want to start today. Of course, integral to this campaign are the Infrashakti Awards that will honor and celebrate change makers who are contributing to India's growth story. More on that in just a little while, but to introduce our panelists on this very special program, Karuna Gopal Vartakavi is President of the Foundation for Futuristic Cities and an independent director at Engineers India. Vaibhav Dange is a public policy expert on infrastructure, green fuels and sustainable mobility. And Image Guru Dilip Cherian, who wears all sorts of hats, depends on the occasion, but he's here on the jury for the Infrashakti Awards. I'd like to thank all of you very much for being with us. Karuna, let me come to you first. As the head of the Foundation for Futuristic Cities, someone who's influenced urban transformation in India, to what extent has sustainable and resilient infrastructure been part of your advocacy and of your work?
I remember when I started working in the urban space, people called me elitist. They said that she chose to work in cities. But little did people realize that the intention is when you start working in a space that is so crowded with, technology vendors, people into advocacy, activists, etc., there wasn't much room for sustainability or thinking on those lines. So when smart cities also was proposed, I was perhaps one of the only few people who spoke about embedding the principles of sustainability in creating infrastructure and deploying technologies. So to that extent, I had a ringside view of how infrastructure gets created and how important it is to look at sustainability for the future or for the country itself.
Vaibhav, when we speak about sustainable infrastructure, what are some of the biggest barriers or challenges that you encounter?
For a country like us, where our infrastructure backlog is very huge, still it's huge, though we have seen a lot of infrastructure growth, particularly into the transportation infrastructure, but the gap is still very high. Even for the urban infrastructure, gap is still high. So I think the biggest challenge is to ensure that we reduce that gap, but do it in a more sustainable manner. And therefore, I think India, not only globally, but even Indian cities are facing those challenges of, choke block infrastructure, traffic jams, pressure on the urban utilities. So I think the sustainability as the part of thought process is something which that needs to be brought in at the concept level. And then going on to the engineering of it, materials use, more greener, sustainable material use, fuels use, so whether you are using green vehicles in transportation. So for example, hypothetically, tomorrow we convert all of our transport fleet to electric. That will not make our cities sustainable. So I think looking at sustainability from the each and every aspects of infrastructure is something, right from materials use to the last carbon probable footprint.
Sure. Dilip, when we speak about infrastructure development, how important is it for us to never forget about equitable growth? That it cannot be just, infrastructure development cannot just result in growth for some and no growth for others.
The issue there is access and the price of access.
Yes, exactly.
And I go back to the philosophy that when you're talking sustainable infrastructure, the planning is the most important part of it. I would rather spend 6 hours sharpening my knife and an hour cutting down, the wood or whatever you need to do. Okay? Hopefully not wood, since it's a non-sustainable kind of thing. But the point being that preparatory work, ideation at that stage, and innovation at that stage, that is part of what we try to, for example, award during the process of these awards we were talking about. People with the thought process of making it priced right, available to a very large, everything need not be available to everybody, but you need to have something available to everybody.
Right.
And whether it's a transport solution, whether it's a water solution, a housing solution, very often the problem is that people think that this exact product needs to be available. It can't be.
No.
You need to make sure that you have something at every price range, and sustainability means being able to address that cost question in the right way, with the right planning and the right innovation.
Karuna, you've also contributed to the 100 Smart Cities mission, and that's absolutely critical. So could you tell us a little bit about the 100 Smart Cities mission? How can the development of our urban spaces be carried out with environmental imperatives in mind? For example, much more green space is something that comes to mind immediately. But what else in creating the infrastructure that we seek?
Well, the Smart Cities mission had a very good intention. Basically, we conceived it as standing at the intersection of economy, environment, and equity. These are 3 things which we wanted to achieve by articulating a vision for the cities. Now, there have been a lot of lessons. For instance, India, to my knowledge, even at that time, I gave a red alert. Indian cities were not really ready for a technology adoption. They were not ready. For instance, we saw the innards of the municipal system. We worked right inside. And there were some processes that were not even digitalized. And it's impossible to expect a certain level of adoption of technology when you are not even ready. So that was one of the issues we faced. But since our intention was lofty, we experimented with many things in our country, just like any other country in the world. Now, most importantly, one thing, Vishnu, which I'd like to highlight here, was we clearly said in our country that infrastructure is going to be built in the PPP mode, public-private partnership mode. And when we said that, we were hoping and expecting that private players would infuse equity into infrastructure building. But it so happened that the private players were keen to invest in infrastructure that is marquee, like let's say highways or roads or airports or ports, but they were not interested in putting their money into water infrastructure or areas like building STPs, like sewage treatment plants, which are so important for sustainability and recycling. So that was a big challenge. Today, as a country, we are now exploring ways of attracting investments, the private investments, and we are also exploring the concept of blended financing. At one time we said public finance, private finance. But today we are looking at blended finance, where we want public money, private money, we want grants, we want some CSR investments, We want some philanthropic investments into that, and even multilateral organizations putting in their money. We are trying to now diffuse the situation by exploring different financing models for infrastructure, and more so for sustainable infrastructure.
Vaibhav, what about policy interventions? It's all very good and all very well to think about a model of public-private partnership, but ultimately policy interventions will steer the course for sustainable infrastructure development and construction. Do we expect to see more of that from the government? And if so, what would you like to see?
No, absolutely. Policy intervention is very, very critical.
The bedrock in a sense.
Very critical in making sure that our infrastructure becomes sustainable. I think sustainability, to make sustainability sustainable, we need to create value in sustainability.
Right.
So I'll give you a few examples. For example, we were talking about using recycling, green materials, reusing material to make infrastructure more sustainable. So for example, used tires is a huge amount of waste that we build every year. That is being now blended with the bitumen to improve the quality of the bitumen, reducing cost for the bitumen and making infrastructure more sustainable. So sustainability has to be value generation for everybody, right from the technology, right from the policy makers to the investors and to everybody. Then only the model will be much sustainable.
Sure. We're going to take a short break now. You're watching the first ever edition of the NDTV Infrashakti Awards. We'll give you a lot more of what exactly it is that we're trying to do over here, what it is that we're trying to encourage, and in a sense, details of the vision of India that we'd like to see, but that's after this short break.
एक घर की कीमत क्या होती है जानते हैं? अपने बच्चों को वीडियो कॉल पर बड़ा होते देखना। एक घर की कीमत होती है नाइट शिफ्ट को एक आदत बना लेना। उसकी कीमत होती है बस की सीट को ही बिस्तर बना लेना, चाय को ही ब्रेकफास्ट, लंच और डिनर बना लेना। एक घर की कीमत होती है इस एक सपने को पूरा करने के लिए बाकी सारे सपनों को भुला देना। 35 सालों से हम जानते हैं एक घर की कीमत, क्योंकि हम हैं LIC हाउसिंग फाइनेंस लिमिटेड। घर बसाए, रिश्ते सजाए।
Nothing feels better than having support, and the same goes for your footwear. So you've got to try Skechers Arch Fit. Skechers teamed up with podiatrists and designed footwear with podiatrist certified arch support. Plus, they're machine washable. Get the arch support you're looking for with Skechers Arch Fit.
Hello and welcome to the start of a conversation about sustainability and infrastructure that will help deliver a Viksit Bharat.
Though we have seen a lot of infrastructure growth, particularly into the transportation infrastructure, but the gap is still very high.
Infrastructure is going to be built in the PPP mode, public-private partnership mode.
When you're talking sustainable infrastructure, the planning is the most important part of it.
You know, Dilip, you've already gone through the rounds of judging the winners of this competition. You can break all the rules and tell us who the winners are now if you want, but should you choose not to do that, could you tell us at least about how the stories of a lot of those nominees who were actually pared down are really impressive? Their commitment to this entire cause is remarkable.
You know, there are organizations and there are individuals, and I think the drama is in the story of individuals. The real story is of people in circumstances who find themselves needing to create a solution, and then fighting for that space.
Right.
And that the story of grit is as much a story of technology, of financing, but also of being able to carry that forward as not just a temporary band-aid kind of quick fix, but actually getting a solution which then can be either imitated, copied, or kept going for a long period of time. So as people watch the awards unfold, you will hear stories of individuals who fought against all odds, even organizations, communities coming together. I think those are where the real stories are, and there's a lot of drama in there.
Karuna, let me return to you. Tell us 3 best practices or technical know-hows that could help scale up the adoption of sustainable infrastructure in India.
Vishnu, we are living today when the fourth industrial revolution is operational, which means we have disruptive technologies that can seriously help us, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, geolocation devices. All those important things are right now at our disposal. Now, apart from that, the world, because of its focus on sustainability, has done an enormous amount of work on material science. Like, for instance, I have seen some buildings which actually have something called a bioskin. So based on the temperature, it's going to reflect, change its direction and close the window, etc. So material science has progressed phenomenally. So now we have this ammunition with us. So any kind of an infrastructure that is being built today, right from the conception, right from the word go, technologies have to be deployed and used, and asset creation, asset management, and ensuring the asset is productive along the entire chain. We have technologies today available, and these have to be very, very sensibly utilized by us. But let me tell you here that they also complained at the point in time that this is not being used by many people. So technologies are there and we are not really deploying those technologies. But if we do that, I think infrastructure can be made extremely sustainable.
Yep.
Today we're talking about passive technologies. Just by mere design, an architectural marvel can be created.
Absolutely.
You don't need technology there.
No, I agree with you. In fact, I wanted to come across to Vaibhav. Another very key important aspect is the reality of the times we live in. Climate change is upon us. So when we talk about infrastructure development, we need to be designing structures for greater heat, greater cold, variations in temperature. So the durability of construction is very important. Materials being used is important, and it has to be sustainable as well.
Absolutely. I think we need to put in a lot of innovation and use of technology, both in terms of designing, using our different materials. For example, how can we reduce the use of material is something which is more sustainable. So for example, how do we reduce the use of extra concrete, extra steel? So for example, FRP is being used, which is more, greener, more cleaner than, say for example, or a lot of, as I said, creating value in making sure that these recycle or green materials can be further used. So for example, we created a value in using construction waste in the road highway construction, and that has helped reduce the extra waste that we create every day in our urban centers. So that can be adopted in our infrastructure development. Or for example, nowadays there are technologies available where you don't have to resurface your highways again and again. You can use the same material, recycle it, hot cold mixing, and relay the entire highway again and again. So I think the most important aspect is use of innovation and technology in everything we do. So whether it is designing, whether it is construction, whether it is our materials, whether it is our planning, as she said about using models. For example, we have been using few models in highway development on how do we integrate the traffic management for another 25 years. So those kind of models will help us build more sustainable infrastructure. Otherwise we create a flyover and probably before we complete the construction, the next square is already choco block.
Sure.
So I think all those aspects need to be brought in. So I think effective use of technology at the highest level.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Dilip, one more question. What are the sort of categories that you'd like to see being included for the next edition of the awards, and why do you think it's necessary to create platforms like this to recognize the work that we are talking about? We don't want this to be a one-off, essentially. We want this to be a conversation that continues. Why is it important to be having this conversation?
I think the most important two reasons, I would say, is one, to show and scare, which is that if you don't do this, this is the consequence, which you talked about, climate change, catastrophic change which is happening. And the other is to, in a sense, infuse enthusiasm, because every winner generates 10 other aspirational winners who will say, hey, I need to do this, I need to show people that I'm doing this. And I think that show and tell, which is the opposite of show and scare, provides inspiration. Meaning, because the InfraVision Foundation is committed to this path. We believe that round one is just the start. That building block will inspire others to compete, to send us stuff, but it will also make those changes at the grassroots and at the supra-planning level where it matters. If you can do it, that's great. If you can't do it, this is the consequence.
Well, I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. As I said, this is just the start of a conversation which we want to be looking at, talking about a lot more. Keep watching NDTV for more on the Infrashakti campaign and the Infrashakti Awards, where we honor innovations and solutions that make our infrastructure sustainable and resilient and take us towards a genuinely Viksit Bharat.